We're going to go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting of July 24th, 2019. Will everyone please rise for salute to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Notice of the meeting has been satisfied in accordance with Chapter 231, PL 1975, by advertising in the Home News Tribune, notifying the Sentinel Publishing Company and the Star Ledger, and also posting on the bulletin board and filing with the Borough Clerk. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Mr. Corrigan? Here. Mr. Savili?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
Mr. Foley?
Here.
I want to note on the record at this time that our attorney, Carl Kem, is not present tonight, and we have another attorney from the same law firm, James Polis, who will be representing the borough. Our first application tonight is case number 19-11, Brian and Shauna Harvey, 1 Jeffrey Court. Would you please come up?
Sweet. You could raise your right hand, please. You swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to the best of your ability?
Yes.
Please state your name, please, and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Carrie Avery, A-B-R-Y.
You live at 1 Jeffrey Court?
I do not. I live in Monroe.
You live in Monroe.
25A Pittman Road, Monroe.
Where's that paper? Her name on it. Oh, here it is. I understand that you are authorized to represent the homeowner in reference to this application and signed a paper stating so.
Correct. That's my son and my daughter-in-law.
It's your son and daughter-in-law. Would you please tell the board exactly what you are doing there?
They have a swimming pool that they've had. It's only up for a couple months. It comes down every August, beginning of September. It's been there for 10 years. And now they need a variance to have it.
I understand that this swimming pool is really not located in the backyard. It's basically more to the side. Am I correct?
Well, they have a side lot, so it is in the back to the side, but it's the only place there was level property to put the pool up. So the lot itself kind of is at a corner. So the front faces almost the main drag and Jeffrey Court. So the way their house sits, it's a little cat-cornered, and you go back and it's wide. There's they submitted like a map.
Okay.
I'm not clear. So directly behind them, they have a cement slab, and then they have, I forget what the main road is there. It's not Ernstine, it might be.
This is the survey that we're talking about?
Yes, yes. So the way their house is, they have like more side lot than backyard. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so the patio right behind their house, and then to the side away from the road is where they put it, because they had flat property, level property.
And the pool is up from, say, June till September, and then they take it down?
Yes, correct.
And the kit that has the fencing on it, that also is taken down at the same time that the pool is taken down?
Yes, everything is put away, and then they put it up in the end of June. They have it up for the summer, and then they take it down.
Anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, what are the variances? So the application is for 3 separate variances. There's 2 setbacks associated with the pool, one for a side lot line, one for the distance between the principal structure and the pool, and then we have a setback, or a variance for the location of the pool. It's in a side yard rather than a rear yard. This is a corner lot, so it's, you know, from one perspective, it is a rear yard, but it's on the side of the building. And based on where the structure is on the lot, I don't know that they would be able to meet all of these setbacks anywhere on the property. It's just a little tight for all those setbacks with the diameter of the pool.
Any other questions? If there's no other questions, I want to open this application up to the public. Does anyone from the public wish to comment or speak on this application at 1 Jeffrey Court? Anyone wish to speak on this application, 1 Jeffrey Court?
Mr. Chairman, I move the public portion be closed.
Public portion is closed.
And just one question, Mr. Chairman, just so it's clear. So this fence you were talking about, is that sits on the pool itself?
It's, my son told me to tell you Andrew approved, I'm sorry, Andrew approved this. It's really, the whole property is fenced, but it's different heights. So they got some kind of ladder that actually has a fence on the ladder.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And just to clarify that there's no variance relief being sought for the fence, just for the setbacks and the location.
Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion, we approve the application. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mr. Corrigan? Yes. Mr. Esposito?
Yes.
Mr. Savili? Yes. Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Hey, ma'am, your application has been approved. We will memorialize this application at the next meeting, and you can get in touch with the construction office for the necessary paperwork that you need after that time. Okay. The next application is 19-03, CVS Kaplan, 267 Washington Road.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, professionals. Lawrence Sachs on behalf of the applicant, K-Land 59. This is an application before you this evening for property located at 267 Washington Road, Block 136, lots 28.04, 38, 39, 40, 58, and 59. This particular site is located with frontage on Washington Road, on Sayreville Boulevard South, and on Downs Drive, essentially at the entrance to the Town Lake residential development. Presently, there's an open lot on the corner. The Brick House Tavern is to the east of the vacant lot, and that lot is also part of this application. My client is a contingent contract purchaser for that property, so if this application is approved, we will be acquiring that property, and the Brick House will essentially be demolished, and this site will be developed in accordance with what's before you this evening. The property is located in the Office Services Overlay Zone. What we're proposing is to construct a freestanding CVS store with a drive-through, with associated site improvements, 50 parking spaces. It's a bifurcated application, and I'm sure your counsel can explain to you what that means, but, and I know most of you know what that means, but essentially what we're seeking tonight is use variance approval. We're not seeking preliminary or final site plan. So if the board is inclined to act favorably on this application, then we will be back in front of you for site plan approval. Although, albeit we have submitted a fairly comprehensive site plan, which, we'll discuss all those issues with our engineer. We're also seeking some bulk variances for parking, for some signage, and our witnesses will testify as to that. Just so the board is aware, we're not in front of you in a vacuum. This project really started probably earlier this year when we met with your professional staff at a TRC, and we proposed a set of plans. We subsequently met with the residents of the Town Lake Development. We had a community meeting with them, and we received a great deal of input and comment from them at that time. As a result of those discussions with both your board professionals, your TRC, and with the community, we made radical changes to the plan. And our witnesses will testify to that. But essentially, we eliminated one of the site driveways, which was on Downs Drive. We shifted it closer to the intersection of Sayreville Boulevard. And we also made some other site changes as well in terms of interior circulation. Although we're here, this is our first hearing on this application, we have received a good deal of input from your professionals, from the community. I understand members of the community are here, and certainly we're willing to entertain, what comment they have. But this is our first hearing, but we're not operating in a vacuum. We did make some radical changes. So, Mr. Chairman, I do have several witnesses. My first witness will be the project engineer, Mr. Douglas Grisco. So if I can have him sworn in, we'll proceed forward.
Proceed.
Actually, are these? I'm not sure.
Larry, do you have batteries?
I know Jonah. That one's working.
Sir, I'll swear you in. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you're about to give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to the
I
best
do.
of your knowledge and ability?
Sorry. I
Thank
do.
You state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Douglas Grisco, Grysko, Dynamic Engineering Consultants out of Toms River, New Jersey.
Mr. Grisco, if you can give the board the benefit of your professional background and qualifications.
Yep. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from NJIT and a Bachelor of Science in Physics from Seton Hall University. I've been practicing civil engineering for over 18 years. I've been a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey for over 13 years. I've been qualified before numerous boards throughout the state. I have not testified before the Sayreville boards. I've worked on numerous CVS applications throughout my career so far, and I was retained by the applicant in this case to prepare the plans for the
I make a
district.
motion that we accept his credentials.
Second motion.
Proceed.
Okay, so Mr. Grisco, if you can explain the site plan that you've prepared and some other exhibits which we're going to hand out. In fact, let's mark the first exhibit as A1, and this way you can give the board the benefit of what we're looking at.
Try to stay in an area where both the board and the public can see, so I think this is a good spot, if you will. My first exhibit, I'll mark it as Exhibit A1. It's entitled an aerial map exhibit. This is really a colored version of the aerial map that is already in your plan set. You just have the color on it. So you could see where the site is, as our project attorney indicated. It's basically a rectangular lot marked by the letters PIQ in the center of the page. Consists of 6 lots, the vacant wooden lots, undeveloped lots, and the Brick House Bar Restaurant, a total of 6. It has frontage on Washington Road, Sayreville Boulevard, and Downs Drive. So in this particular case, we're a corner lot, but we actually have 3 front yards.
The entire parcel area is made up of 69,000 and change square feet, 1.6 acres. However, as our board attorney indicated, there's a lot of background that's gone into this to this point. This applicant actually met with the county planning board to discuss the application, and they are going to require a right-of-way dedication along Washington Road. So when we take that into account, the lot area drops down to about 66,000 square feet or 1.5 acres after the 11-foot wide dedication along the roadway. Again, it's the northeast corner, you're familiar with it, northeast corner of Washington Road and Sayreville Boulevard, and the other side is Downs Drive. It's in that OS overlay zone, and where the pharmacy with the drive-through is not permitted. Proposed to demo the existing restaurant and bar to construct a new freestanding CVS pharmacy, and the balance of the asphalt, the existing asphalt parking areas behind the existing bar, and then the undeveloped portions to the west. Just surrounding the site, I'm gonna work my way around the page to the top and to the north is the residential homes. To the east, you have immediately you have the gas station and another automotive repair facility. To the south, across Washington Road, you have additional residential homes, and there's another automotive repair facility. And then across Downs Drive, the divided roadway, you have some wooded area and then additional residences beyond that. Currently, there's one full movement driveway that services the restaurant and bar off of Washington Road, and there are no other curb cuts or driveways around the site. And again, the parking, as you know, is behind the bar property. That is the aerial exhibit.
All right, so let's mark the next exhibit A2, which I believe is a colorized rendering of the site plan.
That is correct.
If there's sufficient copies, sure. Yeah, I don't.
These are, Joan, if you want, there's some leftovers from the first one, and then we'll probably have some leftovers from the second one.
Thank you.
And they can share and pass them around.
So everyone, as you pass those around, my second exhibit is the site plan rendering. What we've done is taken the site plan sheet that is part of your set. We've added color to it to identify the various features of the proposed development. Again, it's entitled Site Plan Rendering. It's dated with today's date, and I'll mark it as Exhibit A2. I'll just run around and kind of identify the colors. Obviously, the green areas are grass and/or landscaping. The darker gray areas are the existing streets or the proposed pavement areas within the proposed CVS site. I'll call it the orange rectangle in the middle of the page is the proposed CVS building, and the lighter tan areas are concrete that surrounds the building, sidewalks, etc. So the proposed is to construct a new 13,111 square foot pharmacy building that has a 1,712 square foot mezzanine level at the rear of the store. That mezzanine level is simply used for storage of products and extra supplies for the store and seasonal type items. So it's not there for the customers or retail sales. This includes a drive-through pharmacy window. As you've seen with many modern day pharmacies now, you have a window where you can go up, drive up to, and you can get your prescription only. You can drop off your prescription, you can pick up your prescription. That is all you can get. You can't get, or you can't request additional over-the-counter type drugs or other products or any other retail products that might be sold inside the store. This drive-through is specifically just for Prescriptions. That is located at the opposite end diagonally from the front entrance, which faces out towards Sayreville Boulevard and Washington Road. So the northeast corner is where you have that drive-through window. And this is not a drive-through that you would expect like a fast food. This doesn't have an ordering station where you talk into a tower and then you pull up from a menu board. The car pulls up directly alongside of the building to the window, and it's almost basically a face-to-face transaction and conversation with the pharmacist or the pharmacist assistant inside. That's a security thing, and it's, you don't have that speaker that you're, talking out into and then pulling along. So it's really a one-on-one conversation. The building, as proposed, is approximately 20-foot high average, and at the front, it's a little bit higher at the front entrance because there's a feature there, making it 28 feet high. Currently, as proposed, under the OS overlay zone, it requires you to look at the bulk setbacks for the B1 business zone. And this layout as presented to you complies with all of the bulk standards under the B1 zone. So we meet the minimum lot area, lot width, lot depth. The minimum front yard setbacks of 20 feet are met on all three frontages. There is no side yard in this case. Rear yard, which would be to the east or to the gas station side, that is met. Maximum building coverage, we're under that amount as well. 25% is permitted, where we're at about 20%, just under 20%. Maximum impervious coverage, meaning asphalt surfaces, building, roofs, etc., you can have up to 85%, and we're at 81.9%. And then the maximum building height could be, or is permitted to be 35 feet. And again, as I had indicated, the front entrance area is a maximum of 28 feet. Again, oriented as far as the building goes, the main entrance faces out towards Sayreville Boulevard and Washington Road, which is the signalized intersection. The drive-through is on the opposite corner. There are trash and recycling containers and compactor along the rear of the building, directly near the building. And then the loading delivery area is on the far side, the east side of the property. There's a designated loading zone where the deliveries can be wheeled across to the loading door on the back of the building. Parking spaces, there are a total of 50 parking spaces proposed. That is typical for a CVS store of this size and for their operational needs. Your ordinance actually requires 75 spaces, 5 spaces per 1,000, but in our case, 50 is the number of parking spaces that CVS works with in this type of store. And there's actually 4 ADA accessible spaces directly around the front of the store. So those patrons can get directly to the front. There's 2 on each side. Just run a little bit with the proposed access. We have 1 full movement driveway proposed on Washington Road, generally in the same location as the existing driveway for the bar and the restaurant. Actually might have slid a little bit further to the east, but it's generally in that same location. Secondly, there's a alternate secondary driveway along Downs Drive further to the west, closest to Sayreville Boulevard. We're not proposing that as a full movement. It will have capability for right in and a left in and a left out of the site, but we're going to sign it so does not permit right-hand turns out of that driveway. That was discussed throughout the process with professionals and others. Circulation around the building, generally in front of the building along Washington Road and Sayreville Boulevard and through the parking areas, it's 2-way circulation where you can go around and get out to either of the driveways. Around going to the north, if you were to come in off the Washington Road driveway and you want to go to the pharmacy window, that's going to be one-way circulation counterclockwise around the building. You could reach the pharmacy window, or if you choose and you say, a customer decided, well, I really need to go into the store, you can get around and you can come back and circulate to the front of the store and get to a parking space. Will point out as well, and I had mentioned it, the applicant met with the Middlesex County Planning Board. We discussed the application and what would be required. There will be a right-of-way dedication along the entire frontage of Washington Road. This is consistent with adjacent properties that already have this extra right-of-way width. There will be road widening along the frontage, the entire frontage of Sayreville Boulevard, so along the entire frontage of the CVS property. Our traffic engineer will go into more detail on that, but the county also requested, as part of that widening, they wanted to see a dual left turn lane slot striped into the middle of Washington Road. What does this do? Our traffic engineer will go into more detail, but will allow motorists to continue eastbound on Washington Road, and also motorists to continue westbound on Washington Road in either direction, while someone who wants to turn left into the CVS site will have a dedicated lane to stay out of the lane of traffic. It also will provide the residences on the south side of Washington Road ability to turn into their driveways, because there'll be that dedicated slot there as well. Again, our traffic engineer will go into more detail. That pretty much, well, I do want to point out, along Downs Drive, I think everyone's familiar, there's a fairly large, and it tapers, but retaining wall along Downs Drive. We're proposing to leave that intact here. When we met during the preliminary meetings with the town and with also the residences, at one point we had a driveway going straight through and a second driveway going straight through from Washington across from Whitehall Court. That was going to provide access to the drive-through window. We heard the concerns regarding that second driveway, also that retaining wall there. We took a look back and we looked at what we could do to eliminate that second driveway and just keep one driveway furthest to the west. We have done that. That driveway was eliminated. The wall that exists along Downs Drive will remain. It will provide some extra screening along that area of the site to the CVS building. An additional wall would be constructed on the CVS side, so you'll have kind of two walls to create almost that visual screen or barrier. And on top of that wall, in between two walls, we'll actually propose some evergreen type plantings to give even further screening. I have an exhibit that I can share with everyone kind of depicting that. So yeah, that was it. We eliminated, we heard the concerns, we eliminated the driveway, the second driveway, and that's why we have the full counterclockwise circulation from the drive-through window and the back of the store back out to the front, where a motorist could leave either via the Washington Road driveway or the Downs Drive driveway.
Mr. Grisco, let me just fill in some of the gaps here, just real quickly. What about recyclables and trash? How is that going to be handled?
Yeah, I was going to get into, I'll do operations now, if you will.
That's fine.
Okay. Operations, this CVS store is not a 24-hour store. It's not proposed to be. The store hours will be 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday. The pharmacy is a little different than the store. 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday. So the pharmacy will actually be closed an hour before the store. When the pharmacy inside the store is closed, The pharmacy window is also closed. So there's no utilizing the outdoor to use the pharmacy. Once it's closed inside, it's also closed outside. On Saturday, it would be from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for the pharmacy, and then Sunday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you have less hours on the weekend in the evening hours. Typically, CVS can employ 30 full-time to part-time employees during staggered shifts, and 6 to 8 employees are in the store at any one time, which can consist of your store manager, your pharmacist, 1 or 2 pharmacist assistants, and your clerks who are running the cash registers or working in the store areas. Getting to the point as far as trash and recycling, you have a dumpster located on the rear. We have them shown here in blue. One of those is a trash dumpster. That can be picked up once a week by a typical hauler, private hauler. The recycling, most of CVS's materials are recyclables, whether it be cardboard or other recyclables. They figure it's anywhere from 80 to 90%. There is a compactor there where they can store that, and that only has to be picked up once a month. Deliveries for the store. CVS brings out their delivery truck from their headquarters and warehouse down in Lumberton, New Jersey. Typically goes out with products for 3 to 4 stores once a week. A typical tractor trailer, WB50 tractor trailer, will deliver to this store. So we envision it coming in off of Washington Road, utilizing the striped loading area to stage when it is there for deliveries. The driver will turn the truck off so it is not idling. They're usually there for about no more than 45 minutes. The products are sorted in totes, and they're ready to deliver to the store, so he pushes them out in totes to the loading door on the back of the store. Once he's done, he can circulate back out of the site, and both driveways were designed to accommodate a tractor trailer. They're wide enough for the tractor trailer truck to navigate through. Again, that's once a week.
And at what time? Around?
It would be during normal business hours. They do not do deliveries when the store is not open or it's closed. So anywhere from the hours that I stated. So if it's open at 8 a.m., as I said, would be the earliest. It could be 8 a.m. or it would be later. Typically, the truck goes out to 3 or 4 different stores in the area, and they decide which they go to first. It could be later in the day, but it's during normal store hours.
And Doug, what's the largest wheelbase of a truck that would be on this site?
It's a WB50.
Okay. And in terms of frequency, how frequently are the deliveries occurring?
Again, for the CVS products, once a week. That's the products that CVS stocks in the store, health and beauty items, those type items. Outside vendors, such as a Coca-Cola truck or newspaper periodicals, they can have additional deliveries from those type vendors throughout the week. Milk, those would be in smaller vehicles. They're not going to be a tractor trailer, be a panel truck van, or where they could, again, use the loading zone area that's designated, or sometimes a smaller panel type truck could actually utilize one of the parking spaces as well and go through the front door.
So how many would you estimate? How many
For those,
deliveries? 20, 25 different carriers between
no, basically
potato chips?
one other type delivery a week, so up to maybe 6 to 7 other vendors would come. Coca-Cola, newspapers, so maybe one other vendor per day a week in a smaller type truck.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is it possible that this tractor trailer could make the delivery, say, at 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning? Is that possible?
No, CVS does not allow that. We have an operational person here from CVS who can testify to that. They do not deliver when the store is closed.
And the hours of operation, I think, which Mr. Grisco testified to, would be 8 a.m., starting at 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., so it wouldn't be early in the morning. And Mr. Grisco, one other question. The trucks that are making any deliveries, they're not idling, is that correct?
No, he would come in, stage in that, he would shut his truck off until he is done with his delivery, and then obviously restart and then leave the site to his next destination.
How do you control that? I can see the CVS driver, he's under those strict rules, but as far as the Coca-Cola, the newspaper guy, all those, how do you control that idling aspect?
Again, I would think that that's, CVS store manager can have some control over their vendors, telling them that they must, turn their vehicles off.
And Mr. Foley, that can be something that's incorporated into any agreement that we have with these vendors, that you're not to idle your trucks. Obviously, they want to make sure that they're not idling because we want to be obviously not causing any additional pollution, any noise. So certainly that's something we can control.
And why weren't you able to get the loading zone as our ordinance states within the building?
In this particular case, the CVS with the truck, they've had this before where they can have the loading zone directly opposite. The doors are here where they can push the products across. We do have some topographical aspects that we have to consider in the full design when we get to that. So this is predicting and looking ahead as far as what that will be when we reach the full, if we reach the full site plan design. So we've looked at that ahead, knowing that the grade coming in at the driveway, it's going to drop down. We have to get to a level area where the truck can stage and they can push the products across. So,
Because I see the concern with the loading there, and then the vendors constantly crossing a thoroughfare to, almost a thoroughfare, even though it's just it's a parking lot, but they have to cross that, and that activity is going, you got two activities going on. It's like delivering in New York City almost. Not that much high traffic.
our traffic engineer is going to go into the frequency use of that drive-through window and additional, aspects on that. So, he'll provide some testimony as to the use of that rear area as well.
Thanks.
And again, Mr. Grisco, the outside vendors who would be coming in would be 6 or 7 a week in addition to the...
Yeah, pretty much one per day. You can figure
right.
one per day.
All right, so there's not a lot of loading or unloading activity occurring on this site.
No, and they're fairly quick. They're bringing one product, whether it's Coke or dropping off some milk. It's not like the CVS, so it's different.
All right, and the WB50 truck, that's downloaded with totes, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
I'd like to go back to a question, a comment that you made earlier, that CVS only needs 50 parking spots. Our ordinance calls for 73. Are you asking for a waiver of the 23 spots, or are you going to put 73 parking spots according to
Mr.
our
Green,
ordinance?
Yeah, I can respond to that, Mr. Chairman. We're asking for a variance on that. We have some extensive testimony from our traffic engineer. I know Mr. Grisco can probably get into it, but you anecdotally, and this is something we kind of suspected, even at 50 parking spaces, this lot will probably not even be half occupied or half capacity. We've done some parking counts at other CVS comparable size stores in similar neighborhoods, and we'll present that testimony to you. But we are seeking a variance.
That might be true, but we do have an ordinance that says 73.
We understand that, but you don't have it's interesting, you don't have an ordinance specifically dealing with pharmacies, though. So it's just a general retail ordinance. Suffice it to say, if we were to put a medical office in here, we would trigger much more parking demand based on your ordinance dealing with required spaces for that. But we have some empirical evidence that we can provide to the board that will show what the demand is for parking on this site.
Okay, but your position is that you want 53, 53.
50.
50, okay.
You'll also share with us the locations of those other
Yes,
spaces?
yes.
Because my concern on that one is that when you said that with the pharmacy, so it's a pharmacy because they have a drug counter. But in reality, when you really look at it, it's kind of like a convenience store with all the other things that they do sell. So what makes the difference between a pharmacy and a retail store?
Well, again, we're going to present the test. You know, we have some real data on this because even have a representative from CVS who can discuss this. They have obviously a number of stores in New Jersey throughout the Northeast. They know what their parking capacity is in these parking lots at any store. And listen, we would hope that they would be full, but they're just not. It's just the nature of how customers shop at a CVS, but we'll address those issues.
Mr. Sacks, of those 50 spots, how many are going to be handicapped?
4. The ones directly around the front of the building that are shown in the tan, that's the concrete at the front.
So it's 46 and 4, right?
Total of 50.
Total of 50.
Mr. Sachs, just to clear the situation, am I correct that Kaplan is going to build this CVS and lease it to CVS? Or is CVS going to buy this?
No, K-Land is the owner of the property. Obviously, they'll have a general contractor build it out, and then certainly they'll have a lease with CVS.
Okay, so Kaplan will own it and lease it to CVS, correct? So Kaplan is building this according to the specifications of CVS, am I correct?
Gotcha. So let me just clarify. It's going to be a ground lease, all right? So the building will be built to the specifications of CVS. That's correct. But Kaplan will continue to own the property, and obviously CVS will operate the site.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question, please? So we have a Rite Aid, we have a Walgreens, we have a CVS. How long is this agreement going to be typically?
You know what, I can bring a representative from Kaplan up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine, but generally it's a long-term lease. I can tell you just from my own knowledge of how these leases operate, it's not a 5-year lease, it's probably not a 10-year lease.
Right.
It's probably a very long-term lease with options to renew.
Okay. The reason I ask is because let's presume everything goes well. Let's assume they go back and the store just doesn't make money. They close shop. What happens then to the property?
Well, correct, right. If CVS closes, they file bankruptcy and they just close all their stores or decide to close this store, yeah, they can close with it, right. I mean, certainly
Close
it's
about 1% a
it's
year.
retrofitted, obviously, for another user of similar use. All right, I don't need to name the competitors, but we know who they are. And certainly, if there's no interest in that type of use, then they may be back in front of this board for an approval for another type of use. Okay, so, Mr. Grisco, before we get, and I know you have another exhibit I want you to testify to, briefly explain landscaping, lighting. I know this is obviously a bifurcated hearing, but just briefly go into that if you don't mind.
Again, using same exhibit, the site plan exhibit, the green areas around the perimeter site are the proposed landscape areas. We have shrubs and trees proposed around the perimeter, evergreen trees along the eastern side where the gas station is located, and again, on top of what will be the existing wall and the new wall that would be on the CVS property, we're proposing arborvitae shrubs on top of that wall for additional screening. So in all, we're currently showing, again, this is for the purposes of use variance application, showing 7 shade trees around the perimeter, evergreen trees, 20 evergreen trees, most of them along the eastern side, and evergreen shrubs, upwards of 170 shrubs throughout the site, in the front of parking stalls and around the perimeter, and other ground cover or perennials in the parking lot areas or around the perimeter areas. Site lighting, obviously there will be site lighting. That's another item that will be addressed further during the, if we reach the site plan application. We are contemplating that there would be LED fixtures to light the parking lot areas, and then other building-mounted lights around the perimeter. The ordinance permits the site lights to be up to 25 feet minimum, or it could be up as high as the maximum height of the building. So in this case, we anticipate that they're going to be 25 feet or less, and obviously we'd have to comply with all ordinance requirements as far as foot candles and spillage, which we anticipate that we will be able to do. All LED fixtures are high efficiency. They're downward facing where they really push, direct the light downward versus outward. There's no glare. So within that area, we did provide a preliminary lighting plan where we have pole-mounted lights along the Washington Road frontage and a couple of additional pole-mounted lights within the parking areas in the two islands, and the rest of the site lighting will be on the CVS building.
All right, and since this is not a 24/7 operation, we're going to be shutting down at 10 p.m., there's obviously no need to have the lighting on at night, is that correct?
Correct. The lighting will turn off shortly after the store does. There's some security lighting that obviously has to remain on as the store manager and the employees finish up for the evening and before they leave for the, so within that, 10 to 10:30, as they shut down, there's some security lighting, but then everything is turned off, whether that be, we don't have, signs are not part of this application at this time, but signs or lighting, site lighting, are all turned off when the store is closed.
Is that controlled at the store or at the headquarters?
At the store?
At the store.
Yeah.
Usually, they've been moving to centralize it.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be low, there's going to be obviously mechanisms inside the store to turn off the site lighting, timers, et cetera, so. Okay. All right, and just a couple other points, Mr. Grisco. I know you showed the improvements on Washington Road. Those are depicted, I guess, on the southern portion of the site?
Yes.
Okay.
Along Washington Road, down the center, you could see we've prepared, shown a preliminary, what we like to, dual left turn lane, where someone could come in and they can come into the CVS, or the residences on the opposite side of Washington Road will be able to turn into their driveways as well.
All right. Let's put up another exhibit now, which is the view from Downs Drive of the site. You have that exhibit?
Yes. Actually, why don't I jump to the architectural?
All right, let's do that first then. Okay. Yep. All right, let's label that A3.
Okay. This is a color version.
Do I have those?
Just for identification purpose, a color version of the elevations of the proposed CVS. This is part of the package that was submitted, so you all should have received it. I will just run you quickly through. This was prepared by Larson Design, again, part of the submission package, and this one's dated back to May 21st, 2019. So if we were to go from top to bottom, just to kind of orient everyone, the front elevation, which is at the top of the page, this is what you would see when you're facing out towards Sayreville Boulevard. So that's the shorter side of the building. The next one down, the second one down, the right side, this is what would face out towards Washington Road. The third one down is the rear elevation, which would be the back of the building where the loading and deliveries take place. We have the trash corral and the recycling, and then you pick up on the drive-through pharmacy window at the far corner. And then the fourth elevation at the bottom, which is the left side elevation, is the side that would face Downs Drive. And as you could see there, again, although we're not seeking any sign approvals at this point, we've showed on the elevations what the typical CVS sign looks like.
Is that lit?
Those are internally lit. Again, we're not seeking that now. That would be part of the site plan application. We're showing what they are. So it's basically the CVS lettering with pharmacy and a heart, their heart emblem, which is their. I do want to point out, especially on the lowest elevation, which would be facing the residence towards Downs Drive, there's no proposed signage at all on that side of the building.
So the bottom one is Downs Drive.
That is correct. And I'm going to go into another exhibit that will depict a little bit further what that may look like when we move forward.
All right, so we can do that exhibit now then. Let's go into A4, which is a profile in what I would call a view shed from Downs Drive. Let's mark that A4.
So what we wanted to do here was, again, let me just for the record, this is entitled CVS Left Side Elevation, has today's date marked as Exhibit A4. As I had testified to before, you have the existing retaining wall that runs down Downs Drive along the sidewalk within the right-of-way. Based upon what we are anticipating the grading of the site to be when we under the site plan application, that wall, as I had testified to, the existing wall is to remain. It's in the right-of-way. It's the light tan wall. So if you know Downs Drive, you've seen it, that's the existing retaining wall. It's lower at the one end, and then as you go out towards Sayreville Boulevard, it gets a little higher, and then it just steps down and tapers to nothing. So looking at, this would be a view if you were standing generally on the opposite side of Downs Drive, say along the sidewalks, or a view from the residences. So the existing retaining wall actually provides a pretty good screening, especially of the drive-through area. This is the window right at this location. You just see the canopy in white. So the cars and the customers are going to be screened by that wall behind there. And as you can see, we're also proposing the arborvitae shrubs on top of that wall, or I'll say in between the wall, because we anticipate another wall will be built on the CVS side. So we have two walls there, and we'll have the plantings on top. That's going to provide that additional screening. So
Where's the wall on the CVS side? Is that going to be same height as this retaining wall, or is it going higher, or?
the walls, again, not fully designed. We're anticipating would be the same height, so we can have the two, and we can have a flat area on top where we could plant the plants.
Okay.
So it would not be any higher. If anything, it might be slightly lower, but let's call it, it would be the same height.
Excuse me, could you explain why the second retaining wall is needed?
We have again, we had to look at this in the site design. During a full site plan application, we would submit a grading plan and other detailed drawings as part of it. This is the bifurcated use, so we do not have a full grading design plan. However, with the property survey, the entrance and where the driveway area off of Washington Road is at one elevation. You have the driveway at Downs Drive is at a lower elevation. If you know Downs Drive, it basically tapers down, or it goes down from the east to the west as you reach Sayreville Boulevard. So the wall is needed because the CVS, when we regrade the site, is actually going to be, the entire site is going to be lowered. So let me try to put it in existing conditions. The restaurant bar, as you know it, is fairly high up, and above that, at the wall, is where the parking lot area is currently behind the building. We're going to take that grade down. So the CVS is going to be recessed. So it's going to be blocked by that wall. So in order to make up that grade, we need another wall on the other side, because we're going to be that much, lower. And that's why you do not see, or you could see that the drive-through is hidden. So we're going to, be screening it by, 6 to 8 feet.
So you need your own retaining wall?
We're going to need our own retaining wall, which will basically run the same length.
Mm-hmm.
This retaining wall, again, is along Downs Drive in the right-of-way, and we're not touching that. So the CVS one will be built within the property on the CVS side.
All right, so Mr. Grisco, headlights from the drive-through will not be visible on Downs Drive.
No, not with those walls there and the additional landscape screening. They would be lower, blocked by the wall.
Okay. Anything else you want to add about this exhibit?
I just, perspective, again, we're going from the east To the west, the right side of the page here would be where Saraville Boulevard is, and we've just depicted 2 cars where that driveway is proposed, just to kind of give you some perspective. So that's the front of the store. Going back to Exhibit A3, that would be this side of the store, the front of the store. So this is where the driveway comes out.
I have 2 questions on that exhibit. Where the driveway comes out, does that driveway dump out right into the driveway of the house that's right across the street?
It generally does align with the driveway that is across the street.
And my second question is, all of the equipment that's on the roof, the air conditioning equipment, that's all going to be visible from the street?
The equipment that you could see on the roof, that's all at the center of the building. It's right at the center. The architect, that's all in the center, but there additional screening can be put around those HVAC units so they will not be seen. But you are seeing those at the moment, but they have additional screening that can be put up.
And there's no other place that you could put that parking lot, so it's not, so the lights aren't hitting that house when they pull out.
Again, looking at the site and going through the existing, if you go down on Downs Drive and based upon what we envision the grading to be, we have to come out level at the edge of, or where Downs Drive, where we meet Downs Drive. Across the street, that particular property has some change in grade. We didn't survey it, that's private property, but if you go there and you look, the resident's driveway goes upwards to their driveway door. So I don't know what the exact change is, but let's say maybe it climbs 2 to 3 feet upwards towards their driveway or their garage door. Their garage door. So there's a change in elevation. It's not like the house is level directly across. If you were to stand on Downs Drive looking across, their driveway slopes up. So a car coming out, any lights at that 2.5 to 3 foot mark was really be probably going directly into their driveway, not into a window, because of the grade change.
I have a question. The drive-in and the tractor trailer, when they're finished, they can make that right turn out of your parking lot onto Downs, correct?
No, I think Mr. Chairman, we're going to restrict right turns. There's not going to be any right turns.
You can make a left turn.
You can make a left turn.
Your left turn onto Downs.
Correct.
The tractor trailer can do it. Also, people coming out of the drive-in, and also people who are parking there. And what they could do is, when they come out on Downs, they could make a right on Serval Boulevard and go the entire route of Town Lake and come out on Main Street. Am I correct?
Well, conceivably they could, but certainly there's room for these tractor trailers to actually circulate the site and go out onto Washington.
Yeah, I realize that, but also they can go out onto.
They could, and I'm sure that there could be a restriction put into any, if in fact the board acts favorably, to discourage that type of movement so that the traffic could go out onto Washington.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Grisco, just a few other questions now.
Not yet.
Let me clarify something to the public. Right now, we're hearing the testimony from the applicant. After all their testimony is done, the public will have the opportunity to speak at that point to the board and make their feelings known. So up until now, it's just the applicant and the people testifying. Thank you.
I have one more question. What would prevent patrons from parking on Down Street and just parking there and walking around into CVS?
Well, again, there's obviously, we're going to demonstrate that there's enough parking in the parking lot that that's really not necessary. And I think right now, and Mr. Grisco, I think you can probably testify to this, there's actually an entrance to the Brick House Tavern where people do park on Downs and access the Brick House Tavern. Is that correct?
In the area of where the retaining wall tapers down to nothing along Downs Drive. There's a slope there, the dirt, grass, whatever. Seems like that is utilized. I have not seen it, but it seems like that is utilized for people to walk up from Downs Drive up into the restaurant bar property. Again, I have not witnessed it, but if you look at what the existing conditions out there, it seems to be traveled, and so.
Yeah, so we're not looking to have anybody park on Downs. Certainly, if they're going to go to the site, they can park in the parking lot. If they live in the neighborhood, certainly they could walk as a pedestrian, either along Washington or Downs or Sayreville Boulevard. But you know, we don't think that that's going to be an issue with parking on
Well, I'm just
Downs.
bringing it up. I mean, you
Right.
could have a nice back-to-school sale, and the parking lot could be packed. You only have 50 spots, and people could be parking along
Sure.
the street.
And I think the way you could control that is certainly signage could be posted that.
We have new
Certainly
batteries,
some-
Mr. Sachs. We have new batteries.
But certainly signage could be posted. You know, we don't want to encourage any parking on Downs. We want, if you're going to come to this site, we want you to park in the parking lot, or if you're going to be a pedestrian, you walk to the site. But we have some empirical analysis that will indicate that this parking lot is, 50 spaces is more than sufficient for the needs of this CVS, or for that matter, any CVS, or Walgreens or Rite Aid. They're just not sites that require that much in terms of parking. But anyway,
So you're suggesting putting signage along the property line on Downs Drive, do not park? So then the residents, if they had a
No,
party
no,
or
I
something,
didn't-
they wouldn't be able to park?
I didn't say that. It could be to the effect of, you know, this is not for CVS parking. I mean, I've seen signage like that in other residential areas. But no, I'm not discouraging anyone from parking on Downs. If they're visiting someone on Downs and, you know, they're having a party, certainly. And you know, certainly some of them probably going to park in the CVS parking lot as well, which we know is human nature, so.
Well, also, Mr. Sachs, you're promoting 50 parking spots, and you're talking 30 full-time employees.
No.
Mr. Chairman, 6 to 8 at a time. That's the total number of employees, but each shift would have about 6 to 8 employees.
Correct.
And you do have some handicap parking.
Yes.
So it is conceivable at one point or another, you could get that parking lot pretty well filled up.
It could, but I don't think it would ever get to the capacity of being completely filled based on a wealth of information that CVS has as to other stores and just some recent parking counts that we took, you know, within the last week or two.
Okay.
One more. Will you be speaking to the lack of residential character that this is a mock-up of the building, I'm thinking, right? They only have a few different designs, CVS?
Yeah, that is their most modern standard elevations that they're using at their stores now that's been presented.
Okay, because I think it's important to talk to the lack of residential character that this building offers to the neighborhood.
So we can, Mr. Foley, we can address that
Okay.
because we were prepared for that question, so we can certainly address that. Before we get to that, though, there was a comment, and Doug, maybe this is a good point to get into the alternate parking plan that you have, which I think is we'll mark it as A5. But one of the comments in Mr. Cornell's report concerned seeing if we could accommodate crosswalks within the parking field, within the CVS parking field. So we actually do have an alternate plan which doesn't change any of the parking. We can still provide the 50 parking spaces. We're actually able to provide a little bit more landscaping, and we can provide the crosswalks. So let me hand that out. And Jay, I apologize, but we just did this exhibit the other day, but I think it's something we had discussed at our TRC, so. All right, so yep, sorry, Doug.
Yeah, why that exhibit's being passed out. Again, this is the alternative site plan that was described. It's dated today's date, 7/24. Mark it Exhibit A5. It's not in color, as we had indicated. We just looked at this in response to a few comments that were in your board engineer's letter. I'll simply point out where the changes are. It was provide a crosswalk from the front of the store out into the parking spaces towards Saraville Boulevard. If you look at the previous version in color, we did not have a crosswalk. We also did not have an island dividing those parking spaces. So the two comments in Mr. Cornell's review letter were to provide a path for customers to walk across the aisle and get to the parking on the opposite side. We've shown that by utilizing the handicapped accessible aisle and extending it across the drive aisle and through the parking spaces on the far side. In addition, on the original exhibit, going back to A2, you could see that center row of parking. Basically, you could pull in from either direction on either side because there was no island. We've added a 3-foot island to divide it so you can only come in from the one side. The only gap we have there is to provide that crosswalk. We don't lose any parking. We still have a total of 9 in that section and 50 for the site. And that additional, curbed islands can have some additional internal landscaping.
Okay, and as a result of this, we were actually able to reduce the impervious coverage on site?
Yeah, we would reduce it a little bit. It would still be, under the 85% requirement, be down towards 81%.
81.4?
Yep.
Okay.
And then the landscape percentage would also increase reciprocal of that. So we can provide some additional landscaping with this.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I could just have 1 second. Mr. Foley, we're going to address your question about residential character because we do have an alternative facade, okay. I'm going to have Mr. Grisco introduce it, and when we bring the architect back up, we'll get into more detail.
I believe this would be Exhibit A6 at this
A6,
point.
yep.
Okay, this is a colored exhibit of the alternative architecture that we've spoken about, again, prepared by Larson Design Group, who is the project architect, and it is actually dated July 19th, 2019. If I were to compare, compared to Exhibit A3, which is what was proposed and shown, what we're showing here is more of a colonial style architecture. Again, the architect can go into detail. I'll give a general description, but you're looking at the horizontal clapboard type siding, hardy plank type siding that's shown in gray. The upper elevation, just using the same method that I did when I introduced the previous elevations. The top elevation would face out towards Saraville Boulevard. The second elevation as the right side elevation would be that faces towards Washington Road. The third one down would be to the east. That's the rear elevation. That's where the loading and the trash enclosures and the drive-through window, that would be facing to the east. And then the bottom elevation would be what would face towards Downs Drive. Again, in this particular case, it has a brick water table all the way around in a red type brick. You have mansard roofs with charcoal gray type finish. You have the white accent bands, probably an EFIS type material where the CVS signage is proposed. You have the windows shown in blue. In this particular case, you can see in a residential type style, you have the mullions, or the grills, I like to call it, on the glass. giving that, home, if you have your windows at home, similar to what you see here, you have the grills on the windows. That's proposed versus your blank glass, which was on this previous elevation. So, again, the architect can go into more detail, but this was an alternative option that we've considered to provide that and address that residential character component that we've brought up.
Excuse me, the top image, that's facing Sayreville Boulevard?
That's correct.
You have it?
Washington.
That's facing Washington Road.
I think this is a mixed one, because you got Route 31, what was it, you do this out in Flemington?
This is from another location.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think you got to reorient
Okay.
into us.
But, all right, Mr. Grisco, in terms of this particular style, this has been used at other CVS
It has.
locations?
It's-
Okay.
It's a colonial style that is an option that they have to use. Again, architect can go into more detail, but this is, more residential in character, if you will.
And just so the record's clear, I think the top elevation would probably be facing Sayreville Boulevard.
Right,
The
Washington.
second elevation would be
Yep.
Washington.
Yep.
The third elevation would be, I think,
Bar.
the side, and then Downs Drive would be the bottom
The
one.
roadway names that are on there, as you pointed out, please disregard.
Does this do anything to your height?
No, actually. Well, I should say, as far as the mansard roofs around are at a maximum of 25 feet. The tower element at the front does get a little bit higher at 32 feet based upon the mansard style roof. But again, the ordinance permits up to 35 feet.
Right.
So we comply. So generally, the entire building is the same height, other than that element at the front of the store, which would face out towards the intersection.
Where are your mechanicals on this one and the other one?
The mechanicals are also on the roof in the center of the building. Because of the mansard roof that you have around the perimeter, it actually, in this particular case, provides some screening. And I think, the architect can expound upon that, but this, because you have that mansard roof all the way around the perimeter in the gray charcoal, it provides additional screening. So we actually address that as well.
All right, Mr. Grisco, anything else you want to add about your presentation? Have you covered everything?
No, as far as without, as far as the use variance, yes.
Okay.
One more question, Mr. Sachs. The CVS sign that's there, that will be illuminated?
Again, typically the CVS signs on the building are illuminated. They're internally illuminated. We've showed them for informational purposes only as part of the application. We're not seeking the approval for the signs at this time. They're really just, informational, so you can see where the primary signs would be located on the building.
And they would be that big?
That's their typical sizes as shown right now, but we'd have to go into that under the full site plan application.
Right, we're not asking for any approval on the particular signage this evening, so that would be something we'll reserve for site plan.
I have one last question. On the Washington Road side, will there be a retaining wall on that side as well?
Washington Road. Let me go back to. We do not anticipate a retaining wall being needed along Washington Road. Along Sayreville Boulevard, because the grade of Sayreville goes down towards the intersection, it falls, envisioning like a lower type landscape wall that'll be along the front parking spaces, but not as tall as what is existing in the rear. So there will be, again, we're predicting what it would be, but a full design would be done under the site plans.
I have a quick question about, since we're talking about the mechanicals, you plan on having a generator on site?
Good question, yeah, let's answer
I can
that.
address that. I've spoken with the CVS operations. They do not have a backup generator for any of their stores. How they handle it is everything is alarmed, and they have 24-hour monitoring where if the temperature of the refrigeration units or power failure takes place, it's alerted to their corporate headquarters, and they have 24-hour emergency generator service or others that could come out and possibly, make a repair or whatever. But there's no standby generator unless there is a need for it. Again, alarms on the refrigeration units, whether it be, for the milk products or whatever, and that goes directly to corporate headquarters.
When you say generator service, that means someone could bring a generator there, leave it in the parking lot?
If they needed to, if there was an extended power failure, since what many of us have experienced this past week in Monmouth County, et cetera, a standby generator could be brought in, but there's not one proposed or one, a permanent generator proposed.
Now, if that were to happen, where would that be parked?
If that were to happen, I would have to say that it's going to be somewhere along the back of the building, and I'm going to just go back to the site plan, which is Exhibit A2.
When you say back of the building, do you mean down street?
The rear, nope, the rear of the building facing out towards the east, towards the gas station. We actually have a screening wall around the loading area. So I would expect that the utility closets inside the building, that you'd probably stage that generator right in that space behind the door, and you'd have that screening of the proposed wall.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further questions of Mr. Grisco at this point, so.
Does anyone else from the board have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, we provided an engineering report that listed a number of waivers. Did you want to speak to those at this time?
I was going to, Jay, if you want, we can. I was going to wait till, but sure, we could do it now, yeah.
Mr. Sachs, are you going to Jay Cornell's report now?
We could do Jay's report, sure. Let me pull it out.
Best to just hit the waivers or go down one by one, or how would you like to?
I think anything that's site plan related is not really going to apply to your use variance application, so you can skip over those, but the waivers and anything else that may apply, you should probably address.
Okay.
Well, you know what, Jay, I'll just look at it. If you don't mind, I'll just reference the paragraphs. I think going on page general engineering review, obviously, we still need to make submission to County Planning Board and Borough of Sayreville for those permits and DEP if it's applicable. I think we've covered the aesthetics of the proposed building. We certainly can have the architect supplement that.
I think that the ordinance is very specific as to architectural
Yep.
appearance of the building, so I defer to the board, but it's something you may want to try to address further to
Okay.
compare it to the ordinance requirements.
Okay. We'll do that through our architect. That's fine. Number 3, if you want to address number 3, Doug? I think you've covered this in some of your testimony, but
Again, during my testimony, I covered the size of, delivery trucks, where they would be going on to collect trash and/or the recyclables, and, maneuvering throughout the site. So I think I've covered that.
okay.
Is that something your traffic engineer is going to speak more to? Because I think some of the
Okay.
concerns are tractor trailers, and even though they can physically get to Washington Road, from a practical standpoint, are they going to drive through the site during open business hours, which is when you said the deliveries are, or are they going to be cutting out to Downstride?
We could have our traffic engineer address that. That's fine. Okay, number 4 deals with water and sanitary sewer. That's available on this site?
We have contacted, it is available.
Okay. All right, I think number 5, Jay, those are probably site plan issues?
Their site plan, correct,
Okay.
yes.
Number 6, I know we have Mr. Barry's report. We can address that at the appropriate time. Number 7, I think that's also a site plan issue dealing with stormwater management.
Yeah, but you're going to have an underground detention system
Yes.
to address stormwater management.
Yes.
We envision in this case, to have an underground system under the parking lot.
Okay, so I think paragraphs 8 through, probably 8 through 17 are certain waivers. So Doug, you want to go through them specifically?
Number 8 is the minimum 50-foot landscape buffer area where a non-residential use abuts the residential use or residentially zoned lot. So we have that on the northern side around Downs Drive, where we're seeking the waiver for the reduced width, because we have the drive aisle coming around the side of the building.
Could you just indicate, 50 foot's required, what type of buffer are you proposing? What's the width?
Approximately 5 feet at that location, as far as grassed area goes. No parking area, number 9, no parking area shall be constructed in the front yard setback area or 5 feet from a property line. Again, in this particular case, we have 3 frontages, so we do have the parking specifically along Sayreville Boulevard within that front yard area. Number 10 is the parking spaces. We've already touched on that, number of parking spaces.
And our traffic engineer will address that, as will our planner.
Number 11 is the 20% of the site shall be landscaped, and at least 5% of the required landscape area should be along the public right-of-way areas. Again, the impervious coverage is around 81, 82%. So the reciprocal of that is the balance, which would be 18 to 17%. So we're just shy of meeting that 20%. Again, with the alternative plan to add that island, we'll increase that a little bit, but expect that we'll still require that waiver.
And let me ask you another question, too. We're actually making a right-of-way dedication to Middlesex County. That's taking away some room as well.
Yeah, if you were to actually not have that dedication and use the entire lot area that is currently there and do the calculations, we would actually meet it. We'd be around just under 80% impervious coverage, and we would be over 20% on the landscaped area. But
Is that at the expense of Washington Road?
Washington Road, the county wants a dedication, so,
It's not in.
no. And I believe we actually, we could provide calculations, but we do provide some landscaping along the right-of-way, and I think 5% could be calculated, but we can address that further. I think it's the 20% that we do not really comply with.
Number 12?
Number 12 is a minimum of 10% landscaping on the interior. Again, we have pretty much everything around the perimeter. So the definition of interior, we only have 2 smaller islands, so we are seeking that waiver for the 10%.
13, I think we have, the revised plans address that to some degree?
13 is addressed by providing the crosswalk to the parking spaces that I identified. 14 is the waiver for having the loading zone abutting the building where we have it on the opposite side.
And by the way, the justification for that is really the minimal amount of deliveries and that they're done by totes?
Correct.
Okay. 15?
Yep. 15 is fences or walls up to a maximum of 6 feet height shall be permitted only in the rear or side yards. Proposed retaining walls with 6 foot high vinyl fencing do not meet this requirement and should be revised. Again, based upon the topography of the site existing, we envision that these walls and the existing wall that is along Downs Drive is upwards at the highest end of 8 feet. So that's existing. We're going to have retaining walls on our side that are going to be over 8 to 10 feet as we're shown. But that'll be part of a grading plan during the site plan application as well. So we'll seek that waiver for the height. Deciduous trees to be 3 inches in caliper, we can agree to that. That's not a problem. And I think 17 is the site triangle aspect that our traffic engineer can go into further. Number 18, street trees along the frontages. We do have street trees proposed along Washington Road and a few along Downs Drive, but we do not have them along Sayreville Boulevard to provide that visibility to the front of the store, so we're seeking the waiver there. Number 19, the curbed island, we've already talked about under the alternative exhibit. We can provide that. Number 20 is the access drive along Downs Drive. I think our traffic engineer will go into that further, but I've described where it's located.
And actually, you also indicated that there was an additional driveway on Downs, which has been eliminated.
That's correct.
Okay.
21 is, again, the heights of the proposed retaining walls. We've touched on that previously. Use variance approval under number 22, that'll be our planner.
And traffic as well. I think we have some
Traffic,
traffic studies, Mr.
Yep.
Cornell, to address that.
And 23 and 24 are also for our traffic engineer.
Okay.
So, if my math is correct, you're seeking 6 waivers at this point, correct?
I'll accept your math, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if there's no further questions of this witness, I can bring up my traffic engineer to...
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple questions.
I'm sorry, Mr. Barry.
Planner wants to talk, Mr. Barry.
Mr. Grisco, did you consider a design for this project that didn't have a drive-through window?
No, we did not.
Okay. In your opinion, would the circulation pattern on the site be different if there were no drive-through window?
Circulation around the building is typical for most retail uses where you want to have circulation for emergency purposes, et cetera. So if that drive-through was not there, you'd either have it for deliveries or et cetera. But, you know, most modern-day pharmacies, the drive-through window is now part of that, you know, their services that they
Sure.
provide.
I understand. I was just curious if it altered the width of that drive aisle on the north side of the site, changed the circulation pattern significantly. That was really the question.
No.
Okay. With the driveway out to Downs Drive, I know that there's proposed signage to restrict a right turn movement. Did you look at any kind of more physical impediment to a right turn there? Because signs are there, but they're not always followed.
Again, we proposed a right. Our traffic engineer can go into that, how we looked at that further.
Okay, so you didn't consider any other angling of the driveway to
This
physically?
particular case, we've only considered the right turn sign.
But that,
No
we
right
we
turn
could,
sign.
though. I mean, if
Oh, we
there's,
could.
yeah,
Yeah.
we certainly could.
And then you mentioned that the trash collection is once a week, and this may be more of a question for the operator, but do you know the timing of when collection takes place?
I do not, but obviously CVS can hopefully control that to somewhat. They have a private vendor who picks that up, one of the, you know, waste management type companies. So, you know, they can kind of, if needed, they could control the timing of when that's picked up, so it's not early in the morning.
Okay, then we can revisit that. And then the row of arborvitaes between the two retaining walls, you said it's about 5 feet width. I mean, I know you haven't engineered it, so it's a little up in the air. Is that, in your experience, typically enough space to grow a hardy tree of that type in that location?
An arborvitae type shrub grows upright mostly.
Right.
It's not like a large evergreen where you have a larger root base. So in that particular case, you know, an arborvitae is more, you know, cylindrical and grows upwards. And with the two walls and once it's designed, we would not see any, you know, impact to having that type of shrub there. So
And the root structure wouldn't impact the
just-
walls, or there wouldn't be maintenance concerns about the tightness of that?
well, you know, the space will be there. The walls will be designed structurally for that. The plantings will be on top. Again, there's more surface roots, so you're not going to have the large roots like a shade tree that grow down and could impact the wall or, you know, grow underneath it, or et cetera. So don't see any impact for those.
And Mr. Grisco, you could work with Mr. Barry in terms of
Yeah,
recommendations
if there's
for
a
landscaping.
different planting that is, you know, recommended, we could certainly look at others.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
more
just to follow up, go
Go
ahead.
ahead, real quick. So the trash pickup is one, and then the corrugated cardboard, that's another pickup.
Yes. The trash is a dumpster, that's once a week. The
The other
cardboard
one
and recycling, because they have, you know, they can store more there, it's once a month is what they typically.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, to follow up on his line of questioning, did you consider eliminating the Downs Drive entrance and exit? And how would that affect, your overall site plan?
I'm not following the question. There will be a site lighting, plan.
No,
We-
eliminate that driveway onto
Oh,
Downs.
eliminate, sorry, not eliminate, eliminate. No, secondary access is important to the CVS operations. Again, we had 2 driveways proposed on the original. We heard the concerns of that second driveway from the residences as far as it potentially being a cut-through to the drive-through and getting out onto Downs Drive. But no, the secondary driveway is important to CVS operations and even, circulation around the site for, customers and other patrons.
How about from a fire safety standpoint?
I mean, again, in my opinion, from a fire safety, your fire department would want to have access through two sides of the site in order to get in should their emergency situation arise.
All your CVSs have 2 entrances and exits?
I can't testify to every single CVS that is out there, but typically we have 2, a primary means of egress, ingress and egress, and a secondary.
And Mr. Kaczynski, just anecdotally, I think if they're on a corner lot and there's access to 2 roadways, they probably take advantage of it, so that's just anecdotally. Couldn't tell you a specific site. I mean, I probably could tell you a specific site, but I can't testify.
There's one in town with only 1 entrance. We won't get into that.
Mr. Just following up, I was going to ask the traffic engineer, but is it possible to close Downs and have 2 access points onto Washington to give you your secondary access point and possibly have maybe a right turn restriction due to the close proximity to the Seville Boulevard intersection?
Jay, I don't think that's anything we've explored. I mean, we could certainly have a discussion about it, but I don't think that's anything we've discussed thus far, but.
Mr. Sachs, do you have a CVS representative who's going to testify here tonight?
Yes, I do. So, Mr. Chairman, if you want, I don't know if you want to take a break, but if I still have my traffic engineer, I have a CVS representative. I have the architect, although I think we've covered most of the architectural, and then I have my planner. So
You have 3 left.
3 additional witnesses, yes.
Okay, you want to take a 10-minute break right now, and we'll be back at 9:15.
This whole front is big. This, the other one. Yeah, just that tower. For overtime. I wonder why they're renting. They do that. Like Walgreens does it, right? They do that in their front entrance with the window thing, the foyer like.
There's probably gonna be another hearing after this. No, but the questioning, most of people have a job for.
Well, they gave us winter this time. Every time I go for it, it's,
That's from, might be from Monday's council meeting. I didn't see it.
Like engineer was walking, so I don't know about mine. No, that's all right, they can ask me a question, but my traffic guy will be pretty green. It's all right. All right.
Hi, I still got the same team here. You guys accept testimony until the time you guys were coming off. You need something right now? I said, what you just gave me today, you have more of it in your pocket.
they're gonna say, no, you don't want it.
They don't need you here. You want me to go here? I'm not. Everybody has problems. They're moving into something else. But I feel like last year and a half, I've been doing this, but I work with our attorney and Jason. Yeah, but I really like it. No, but I do. I just work the applications. And then when we get the review letters from engineers and planners, I'm personally going through the 26-page letter, making sure that the items are addressed. You're not worried about it? No. I mean, you're still kind of hands-on here. Yeah, so the only place left for you is residential. I haven't seen that. You're picking up, you're really giving it to the embryos. Exactly. We hired an he shaking the brokers in the trees and trying to.
Funny to be on this side.
And I work with him also, evaluating possible deals and things like that. And then capitalists No, I think that's good for you. That's how. Yeah. No, same thing. Kidding yourself.
I thought so.
Same 50. I don't know, but then you add on, I get to my office about 7:30 in the morning. And I live 20 minutes, so by 6:30, it's not here. It's not like you're coming from the city. You gotta go. Did you ever meet Jason? Yes, we met a little while ago. Yes, I met Jason way back when, actually from Palmetto. But yes, from there. I saw the family portrait.
I was going to say you're like part of our family.
You did. How's your father doing?
He's all right. Yeah, no
I'm surprised he's not here.
Yeah, but yeah.
Really? Father is always very charming. We'll see.
I'm going to call the meeting back to order. I want a roll call.
Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Here.
Mr. Corrigan? Mr. Emma?
Here.
Mr. Savili?
Here.
Mr. Esposito?
Here.
Mr. Foley?
Here.
Before we proceed, I just want to mention to the public, so you know, you will be heard tonight if you want to speak. We are going to continue this meeting. I've notified the applicant and our board, and we're going to proceed until everyone testifies and everyone who wants to testify gets heard. So no matter what time it is, we are going to hear this application and conclude it. It's the only fair thing to do to everyone involved. Okay? Mr. Sachs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call Mr. Craig Paragoy, traffic engineer.
Sir, if you could raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to the best of your knowledge and ability?
Yes, I do.
Sir, could you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure, my name is Craig, C-R-A-I-G, Paragoy, P-E-R-E-G-O-Y.
All right, Mr. Paragoy, can you give the board the benefit of your professional qualifications and background?
Sure, I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Virginia Tech. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I've been working as a traffic engineer for 19 years now. I've appeared on hundreds of occasions, including here in Sayreville, as an expert in traffic engineering.
I make a motion that his qualifications be accepted.
Second motion.
Proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Paragoy,
I'll assume my position.
Yeah, why don't you go over by the board, because I'm sure you're going to point out certain things on Exhibit A2.
Doug kept the norm over here for me.
Okay. Mr. Paragoy, I know that you prepared a traffic study, did some analysis as to this site, and if you could give the benefit of your testimony as to traffic issues pertaining to this site, circulation, parking, et cetera.
Sure. I just want to start off talking about the county improvements. Mr. Grisco went through them and explained them a little bit, and I just want to kind of clarify how we got there and explain the benefits of this two-way center-left turn lane that we're proposing. The county wanted to ensure that anybody turning left into the CVS would not impede the through traffic on eastbound Washington Road. That was one of their conditions for allowing the left in. If you do that via a traditional left turn lane, then you make it difficult to access the homes on the other side. It's a little confusing, you know, can I turn across this left turn lane or not? So the idea was put the two-way center left turn lane to service the CVS and the homes across the street. The second thing that I think is a big advantage, if you go out to the site now, you'll see in the median along Washington Road between the two sides of Sayreville Boulevard, there's a left turn lane striped in there. You can't really see it on this plan, it's just off the page. The through traffic coming westbound on Washington Road almost lines up going straight into that left turn lane. So if you pull into that turn lane, the through traffic's almost clipping you. What we're doing is pulling that curb line up to align it so the through traffic will be removed from that left turn lane. So it's going to make that movement a little bit more comfortable, that left turn into Sayreville Boulevard at that signal. So I think that's another pretty key benefit, throwing my papers on the ground, to that two-way center left turn lane. Is just a better alignment of the road. And then we'll provide an appropriate taper east of the site for that westbound traffic to shift to the right. All right, so in terms of the traffic impact study that we put together, what we start with is taking traffic counts, looking for the busiest times of day. When is the road at its busiest, coincident with when a CVS is going to be at its busiest. And typically, for CVSs, that falls on a weekday evening between 4:30 and 6:30 in the evening, and then a midday Saturday, that shopping time period on a Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we took traffic counts at the signalized intersection of Sayreville Boulevard, Green Valley Way, which is off the page and offset as part of that intersection, part of that same signal. And we also took counts at Downs Drive and Sayreville Boulevard. And what we're looking to do is isolate the single busiest hour within those two time periods. So we'll have a weekday evening and Saturday midday peak hours. That's the worst case scenario. What we'll assume for analysis purposes is that the CVS generates its busiest hours at the same time as the roadway's busiest hours. So we're looking at that worst case peak on peak scenario. And just to give you a little background information, in terms of those traffic counts, Washington Road carries two-way peak hour volumes of about 1,200 to 1,300 vehicles per hour in a two-way direction. Compare that to Sayreville Boulevard, where you're on the order of 100 to 150 vehicles per hour, and Downs Drive, very quiet, 30 to 35 vehicles per hour. So clearly the lion's share of the traffic is on Washington Road, based on those traffic counts. The next step that I need to do is sort of look into a crystal ball, look into the future. What's going to happen when this property is redeveloped with the CVS? How much traffic does CVS generate? And what we do to project that is use the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or ITE, trip generation manual. It's a compilation of traffic counts for various land uses, in this case, specifically pharmacies with drive-throughs. And I'm able to use the size of the pharmacy to make a projection based on counts at other locations of how much traffic this is going to generate. Now, a couple things to keep in mind about the nature of the pharmacy's traffic generation. The market for a CVS, as was mentioned before, there's others in the area. There's Rite Aids and Walgreens, and they're in the area. So the market is really the local community, the residents who live surrounding it, and the commuter traffic, the passersby on Washington Road. Again, that 1,300 hourly vehicles. They're looking to pull some of that traffic in to stop at CVS on the way home from work, on the way shopping, that sort of thing. That's called pass-by traffic. And the ITE actually has some research data published for pharmacies with drive-thrus that give us the percentage of the traffic that is pass-by. They only have it published for the evening peak hour, and that's at 49%. So nearly half of the traffic attracted to one of these types of facilities would have already been driving by anyway, and now is able to stop in rather than visit another location or another store. So we're really pulling that traffic in from Washington Road. Saturday peak hour, that's the other critical peak hour that we took a look at, the ITE doesn't publish any data. So in the absence of that, we conservatively just assume that all that traffic is new. Realistically, you're going to have some of that pass-by activity on Saturday. People shopping, they're already going to be traveling on Washington Road. Hey, now it's convenient, I can pick up my prescription, pick up a newspaper, a gallon of milk, because I'm already driving past that. But in the absence of concrete numbers, we just assume that all that traffic on Saturday was new traffic. The other sort of conservative layer that we put onto our traffic study is I didn't remove the fact that the bar is there. There's an open and operating restaurant. Lunchtime on Saturday and a weekday evening are obviously busy times for that bar. I assume that this was completely vacant land. So any traffic that's being generated by the restaurant is essentially double counted and still in my traffic numbers. So I'm, again, trying to look at a worst case scenario. You have those three things. There's no pass by on Saturday, even though there certainly is going to be. I have not removed any traffic associated with the existing bar. And I'm assuming that CVS's busiest hour is the exact same hour as the roadway's busiest hours. So we're looking at that worst case scenario. What we want to do is make a comparison of what traffic conditions are like in the future with and without this project going in. Without the project, you're going to see some incremental growth up to the time period where this could be built. So the New Jersey DOT publishes background traffic growth rate data for this area, and it's a 1.25% growth rate. So I multiply my existing traffic volumes, increasing them by 1.25% times 2 years. So doubling that growth rate to get the future traffic volumes, assuming nothing happens with this property. And that's the no-build condition. For the build condition, I'm adding those ITE numbers for CVS onto that no-build condition, and then making a comparison of the two. And how do we compare it? We prepare what's called a capacity analysis of the critical intersections and the site driveways. It's a computer program that we use that simulates, models the traffic flow during those peak hours and calculates based on traffic signal timing, stop signs, lane widths, and number of vehicles, the average delay per vehicle. That then is related via range of delays to what's called a level of service, A being the best level of service, F being the worst or failing level of service. And it gives us a means to sort of compare apples to oranges in the future. This signalized intersection, with or without the CVS, operates at the same levels of service. It's a D in this case, level of service D during those peak hours, both the evening and the Saturday. Does not change when you add the CVS traffic. In fact, the calculated delay per vehicle that I mentioned, not one movement, not one turning movement increases by more than 1 second. So we have minimal traffic impact onto the adjacent intersection. Same thing with Downs Drive and Sayreville Boulevard. Obviously, that has much lower traffic volumes and could handle many times more traffic than it does. We do not create a substantial detriment there. The levels of service stay the same. No change in delay greater than 1 second per vehicle. The site driveway on Washington Road operates at a level of service C under that future condition. The queue length, which your engineer asked me to discuss, is calculated. It's a mathematical calculation of 0.6 vehicles. So in other words, you're going to have typically one or less vehicles there, and you have enough room to store the one vehicle without interrupting any parking spaces. The second vehicle would maybe block these last 2 spaces farthest from the door, which I certainly don't see being utilized too often, but that's basically the impact that you'd have there. And again, the calculated queue is 0.6 vehicles, so unlikely that you're going to see more than one car waiting to turn out of there, especially given the gaps in traffic that are created by the traffic signal and the ability to use that center left turn lane. So from a traffic impact perspective, certainly there's enough capacity out there. We looked at, again, a very worst case scenario, and, and the CVS can function without detrimental impact to these nearest intersections. Obviously, farther afield would be, the traffic would be dispersed and you'd have less impact than you would have here. So that's it on the traffic end of things. Parking was discussed a little bit before. Your ordinance has a blanket requirement for retail developments. It's 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So if you do the math for the CVS, it's 74. I think you said 73, but I had 74 either way. What it doesn't take into account is the specific type of retail use. In this case, we have a specific user. These are all over the place. We have the ability to look at other ones and find out how much parking that they're generating. The ITE publishes that information. There's a publication called Parking Generation. Just like the trip generation information, it's parking counts compiled at CVS's, Walgreens, Rite Aids, this exact type of use throughout the country. What they've determined is that the maximum average demand at these locations is 2.27 vehicles per 1,000 square feet, which if you applied it here would be 34. Again, we have 50. The statistical analysis gives you a 95th percentile confidence interval, meaning 95% of these are within this range. That range would give us, in this case, 28 to 39 parking spaces. Again, we have 50. Our firm has also done research counts similar to what the ITE does. We looked at, between 2008 and 2014, 5 sites throughout New Jersey, and we came up with a 2.23 ratio, which again, in this case, would be 33 parking spaces. So right along the same lines as the ITE. Knowing that we were coming in for a parking variance here, we wanted to look for a location more recently constructed that sort of fit this area. Recently constructed CVS in Wall, New Jersey. It's in a similar configuration. It's not on a major highway. It's not on a divided highway, anything like that. It's more of a neighborhood location. We went out last week, counted the parking spaces there. The maximum, and it's the same size building, within maybe a couple hundred square feet. The maximum parking demand at that location was 27 parking spaces. So again, you're in that 27, 28, 29, 30 range based on specific locations in New Jersey, based on one that's similar to this that was recently constructed, and based on that ITE data, which is surveyed from throughout the country. So I think based on that, certainly the 50 spaces works. Again, I understand your ordinance relates to just generic retail. This particular use is very specific and generates less parking demand than your ordinance would otherwise suggest based on research throughout the country. I think part of the reason of that is a lot less of the floor area in a CVS is typical retail space. They have the mezzanine space, They have a whole pharmacy in the back. You know, a typical retailer, there's maybe a counter and a small storage room, so there's a lot less floor area. So if you look at that calculation, if you look at your ordinance calculated to the floor area, I think it's about 9,000 square feet of the CVS is dedicated to retail sales, you'd be at 45 spaces under your ordinance. So it does make sense in that regard, but this is a unique kind of use, and that's why I think it makes sense to provide less parking than the 75, and I think the 50 is more than enough, and CVS agrees.
What was Walt's requirement for spaces?
I don't remember. They had 60.
They had 60 parking spaces.
Yeah, I believe it was 60, but 8 of them were in the back by the loading area.
Can you share with us all the locations that you looked at? There
I
were
can.
5?
I can, once I pick them up off the floor. Not a lot of room to work in the corner here.
I hear you.
Mr. Parago, you want to sit down here? Yeah, come on. Yeah.
Everything was in order.
Okay.
I promise. Okay, here we go. The one wall that we just mentioned, that was 14,718 square feet, by the way, so very close to this one. We looked at a CVS on Morris Avenue in Union Township, in Union County. It was a 12,000 square foot store. A Walgreens on Morris Avenue in Springfield, also in Union County. A CVS in Roselle, Union County, and a CVS in Mount Laurel, Burlington County. A CVS on Route 70 in Medford Township, Burlington County, and a Walgreens on Route 70 in Cherry Hill, Camden County. So a fairly good sampling, but recognizing that those were older, that was older data, and maybe not necessarily a similar location to this, we decided to pick up the counts at the wall location, because it seemed to fit better, be a more accurate gauge.
When you did that study and counted the number of cars parked, was it during peak hour? How did you
Yes.
structure the study?
Yes, peak hours. The ITE gives you a breakdown of the percentage of peak parking demand, so we made sure that we captured where the highest was, and that was coincident with the peak hours, 4 to 6 in the evening and 11 to 2 on a Saturday.
And Mr. Parago, you also did some counts of the drive-through facilities at this wall location. Can you share your data on that as well?
We did. The drive-throughs, as was testified to before, are fairly lightly utilized. At the wall location during the evening peak hour, a total of 6 vehicles, 6 out of 63 vehicles entered the facility. 6 of them went to the drive-through. And there was never more than 1 vehicle waiting at the drive-through. And in the Saturday, 78 vehicles entered, 3 of them went to the drive-through. So it's a very specialized type of transaction to the drive-through. You can't go in there and get milk or something like that. It's only for prescription, so it's not like a fast food type of drive-through. It's more for convenience. You got a sick kid, you don't want to get out of the car, you can pick up the prescription at the drive-through. It's not the driving force of why people go there like fast food restaurants.
I got a question. Your survey, your analysis is coming, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're talking during the week, and you're talking on Saturday. Do we have any statistics on Sunday?
I do. It generates less traffic one Sunday, but let me give you that number. The Saturday, I don't have the Sunday generator, actually. The Saturday daytime total volume is about double what it is on Sunday. So Saturday is a busier day. There is no peak hour data published for Sunday.
So you don't have any data on Sundays?
Not a peak hour, just the daily. The daily number on a Sunday is about 1/3, actually, of the daily number on a Saturday.
And actually,
And
Mr.
the
Chairman,
store-
I'm sorry, we have our CBS operations who can confirm that Sunday is not as busy as Saturday. Saturday is likely, I'm sure, is the busiest day of the week.
Is
for-
the Sunday more busier than during the week?
We'll get that information.
Okay,
We have our
and the
operations
store hours on Sunday are 8 o'clock until 5?
For the pharmacy, right.
What about the store
Store till 10
on Sunday?
on Sunday, yeah. Yeah, the pharmacy shuts earlier on Saturday and Sunday.
And another thing to keep in mind on Sunday, that traffic volumes on the road tend to be lower than on a Saturday midday. So again, we're looking for kind of the combination of the two peak times.
All right, so, Mr. Paraguay, to summarize at least the parking counts based on the ITE data, some of the other data that's nationwide data, or at least the data that you have for New Jersey with various sites, and then with respect to the parking counts that you did at the Wall Township store, it appears that, and tell me if I'm incorrect here, that capacity in any of these parking lots, based on these numbers, is probably between 30 and 45% maybe? Give or take?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the Wall Township had 60 spaces, we had 27 maximum, so yeah, a little less than half.
Okay, so even at 40%, or if 40% of 50 spaces would yield probably 20 filled parking spaces during a peak hour?
Correct.
Okay. And that's pretty consistent with your data that you've provided to the board?
Yes.
Okay.
And specific to New Jersey
Okay.
versus the IT.
All right, let's, why don't you go back to what you wanted to go? I've got some things to fill in, but go ahead. Okay.
Okay, back to the corner.
All right. In terms of, there was a question about tractor-trailer circulation on the site and the ability to go out onto Washington. Can you briefly address that?
Yes, you can see the darker color pavement. That's the heavy-duty pavement to handle the tractor trailer, so we have checked it, and it indeed can circulate around the building and come back out onto Washington Road.
Okay, so if the board wanted to put a restriction about any tractor-trailer traffic exiting onto Downs Drive, that would not be problematic for this site?
No, the truck could circulate the site and come back out onto Washington.
Okay, all right. And in terms of,
While he's mentioning that, while you're thinking of what that, when he's making that turn to come out of Washington, what is he gonna, does he have to hit those parking spaces, or what's the width of that hard blacktop?
The
Hard
driveway on the
blacktop,
west side,
yeah.
it's 30 feet wide.
So is that enough for a truck to make that right turn without encroaching upon those parking spots?
It would be a left turn, yes. The truck can come in, circulate behind the building, unload.
Talking about him getting out.
Yes, then when he comes out, he comes around the top, the north side of the building, turns left, left again along the south side of the building, and then out onto Washington.
And stays within that.
Yes, it
Doesn't
stays
have to
within
swing
that,
to
doesn't
the parking
encroach on the
spot
parking.
To make that. What's the width of the driveway getting out?
The width of the driveway on Washington is 32 feet.
and,
Seems
I'm
tight.
sorry, Mr. Polo. And in terms of the alternative plan that Mr. Grisco testified to with regard to the landscaped island now and the pedestrian walkways, you will not have any vehicular conflicts between vehicles pulling out under the revised plan, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it's even safer for a tractor trailer to get around there.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Now, did you have an opportunity to review, I know there was a report generated by the police department that addressed a couple of the traffic issues. Can you briefly address some of those issues?
Yes, one of them, his concern, obviously, and anybody's concern is the increased traffic being generated by the site. That's why we put together that traffic study to determine if it can handle that increased capacity. And certainly, it definitely can. In terms of an increase in accidents, I think actually you're going to see a decrease in, I'll say, a substandard safety condition by aligning this curb line and providing that two-way center-left turn lane. One of the typical accident patterns would be a rear end from somebody making a left. You're removing that possibility by allowing them to use the center-left turn lane. And just from my personal visits to the site, it's uncomfortable to pull into that left turn lane in between the two sides of Sayreville Boulevard with the oncoming traffic having to sort of curve around you. So I think you're going to fix that condition, which is going to be a great safety improvement in terms of the impacts off-site, in terms of the roadway network. I think he also had a concern about the truck traffic, which I think we've clarified is not substantial, not something that is going to create pollution issues. I mean, we have one tractor trailer per week. That's obviously very minimal.
Okay. In fact, he made an assumption that this was going to be 24-hour site. Obviously, it's not.
Correct, and it's not going to be a 24-hour site. Whereas
Okay.
the bar on site today is open
All right,
11:30 till 2 a.m. So,
Okay, yeah, in fact, the brick house is open until very late in the evening.
yes, it has extended hours. This will
Okay.
be daytime.
All right, you've testified that the tractor trailer, well, first of all, there was testimony that the tractor trailer activity is maybe once a week, and that it can circulate the site, because he had concerns about that.
Maybe once a week, or is?
It's once a week.
It's once a week.
It's once a week, yeah. Sorry about the qualifier. It is once a week. Okay. And in terms of idling, we've agreed not to have any trucks idle. So in terms of any life issues. Now, another traffic issue he brought up was school bus stop and pedestrian traffic. If you can briefly comment on that.
Yeah, it's our understanding that there is a school bus stop at Downs and Sayreville. Nothing we're doing would cause
No,
that.
it's on Washington and Sayreville Boulevard.
The school buses at Downs and Sayreville, there's a public,
No, but on the Sayreville Boulevard by the corner of Washington is the school bus stop. It's not down by Downs.
Okay. There's nothing that we're doing on site that would cause the need to relocate that bus stop. As a matter of fact, if you look at the bus routes for your schools that are published online, one of the bus stops for, I believe, 2 of the schools is in front of the Wawa farther down. Wawa's
Journey
much
Mill
busier.
and Washington, yeah.
Yeah, that's much busier, particularly in the morning. CVS doesn't even open till 8. Most of the school bus activity is done by then, by 8 o'clock. And even
Well, it's
so,
open
in
at
the
the
morning,
end.
it's much quieter than a Wawa. So there's nothing that would, in my eyes, that would create the need to relocate the bus stop or redo the bus routes.
Because Washington's a county road, who determines whether it's a hazardous route or not? Because if it is, then we have to move our bus stops, right, for the kids? Because you're changing the direction of the traffic with all these arrows, right?
To my knowledge, is the Board of Education makes determinations as to what's considered a hazardous route. So, certainly a route, Washington Road could be considered a hazardous route right now, and maybe the bus stop was not changed, in which case, if it has to be relocated, that's a determination the Board of Ed makes. But the reason I asked Mr. Paragoy that question is that the peak hours of operation for the CVS, first of all, there's no activity before 8 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the morning school bus routes are really not going to be impacted whatsoever by this. When is the peak hour altogether for the CVS? That's between 4 and 6?
Yes.
Okay, and by then, the kids are out of school already?
Yes, school.
Okay, so there's no conflict then, in your opinion, between the hours of operation of this CVS and the peak hours of operation, and how they could impact any school bus routes or any school children?
Yes, correct. And even so, there's nothing that we're doing that would prevent a school
Well,
bus.
aren't you widening Washington Road a bit towards the building?
Yes, we're widening
Okay,
Washington Road and
because
lining up
right
that
on the
curb.
corner there is where the bus stop is, with the shelter. So you must,
That'll get pushed back, yes.
so you're gonna take care of that?
Yes, it's even called out on the plan, relocated
Okay.
bus shelter, yes.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
just
for the
like to
public.
make a comment to follow up on that. You're assuming that the only time there could be a problem with the school is during peak hour, but it could happen on non-peak hour too, because there's also activity during non-peak hour.
Oh, no, Ms. Konzinski, we recognize that, but the comment, I guess, was from the police chief about impact on school bus routes, and that's the only reason I addressed it.
Yeah, I don't think they're done by 8 o'clock. They're still done, schools
Right.
start. what
The
time?
elementary schools get picked up at that time. But I wasn't sure who deems it a hazardous route, because if the county did, then it's going to cost us, as Board of Ed, it's going to cost us tens of thousands of dollars to move those routes. It always does. So that's why I was wondering, who makes that determination? If Mr. Sachs says it's us as a Board of Ed, that's fine. I mean, we could look into that. But if it's the county, And I don't know who would, it's
I don't-
definitely not the county.
No, I can, I mean, I'll put my other hat on as a municipal attorney. No, the county has nothing to do with determining your school bus routes. It's all done by the municipality.
Mr. Sachs, I just want to make a clarification here. Earlier, you said that the report made by the chief of police was based on a 24-hour. I'm reading this, that's not what he said. He said that although the hours of operation have not been provided, and he's talking about open daily with extended hours.
Right.
So it's really, what you said is not really true. It's not based on a 24-hour chief of police report.
I stand corrected, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
All right, but I think he made an assumption that it was going to be either extended hours or 24 hours, which obviously we're not. I mean, really, our hours of operation are just like any other retail business in town, so.
And in reference to the buses, you know, sometimes the children are going to get out at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they're going to get out at 12 o'clock. So that would be a situation with the CVS.
Well, the reason I asked that question, Mr. Chairman, is whether or not, if the children do get out at 12 o'clock on a half day, or 1 o'clock, or inclement weather, you know, where they come home from school early, it doesn't conflict with the peak volume of traffic that would be generated on this site, which is really between 4 and 6 on a weekday, and on a Saturday between 11 and 2. So that's the only reason I bring that up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Paraguay, any further information you want to provide to the board?
No, just looking back at the police memo, I think we touched on everything that's traffic related. They mentioned service calls, but I'll leave that to.
Okay. Now, I know there were some comments from Mr. Cornell. You have his report?
I do.
Okay. So let me just go through it real quickly, because there's probably some questions you can answer here.
What's your expectation on this loading zone area and the traffic that takes place in between crisscrossing the thoroughfare of people coming into the CVS, using that driveway, that pass-through driveway?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. That's a good point. You brought that up earlier. You're talking about when the vehicles in the loading area, they have to push the totes across.
Coca-Cola guy, the CVS guy, where's the traffic control for that, for those people?
Well, I
load the
anticipate
store
this is going to be a very lightly utilized drive aisle. You're going to have the people who use the drive-through, and you may occasionally have somebody who swings around to the back of the store. But primarily, when you pull in to the CVS, you're looking to go park right by the front door. You're going to come in and you're going to make this immediate left and look for these parking spaces. So I think this is going to be the least utilized drive aisle. And then, I mean, we could certainly paint a crosswalk or something there, but realistically, the delivery person is going to have an adequate view of if there's any vehicles coming and be able to make sure that the coast is clear, essentially, before going across. But this is not going to be a very active drive aisle at all.
So it'll be the coast is clear.
Yes, but if we could paint a crosswalk if it,
In fact, it's probably not a bad idea to put some.
in practicality, I don't know that it's necessary, but it's certainly not an issue.
Okay. And actually, your testimony was just based on.
Let me just point
I'm sorry.
out that our ordinance says that it should be abutted against the building and not across the driveway, and you're not doing that. So I think there should be some kind of measure that clearly outlines that there's something going on at some given time across this driveway.
Yes, understood. And with your typical retail, say a larger shop like a Target or something like that, they're going to have tractor trailers in and out of there all day and a lot of deliveries, so you would want it against the building. This and the once per week scenario, I think, is a little bit more acceptable, but point taken, a crosswalk right there.
Crosswalk, and even if you want signage, we could even put some signage,
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
The stores that you mentioned, right, they're just pharmacy and just your general CVS store where they'll sell, food goods, cosmetic, stuff like that. What about any stores, because CVS is, I guess, getting into the whole walk-in clinics. Some of those walk-in clinics can get, those parking lots can get pretty packed. Did you look at any, or have they rolled that out, that minute clinic thing? And if you have, did you consider that as far as the traffic or the congestion in the parking lot?
Yeah, we haven't decided, there's no indication if this will have a minute clinic or not, but if it did,
But it doesn't mean that they can't put it in the future.
right, but it wouldn't, it's not an extension onto the building, it just takes away some of that retail floor area. And it'd
That
be
would, but that
one,
could generate even more traffic.
Well, it actually, does it lower the parking demand? It actually lowers the parking requirement if you put the minute clinic in because you're taking away retail space. Yeah. So we'd have to, we would require less parking spaces. But did the Wall store have a minute clinic? Okay, I'm told no. Okay. Some of the other stores I assume did, though, that you've done over the years because there are minute clinics throughout the state.
yes.
Okay. Maybe I should ask this question of operations, but to your knowledge, a lot of the appointments that are at the Minute Clinic are actually made online. So you know a specific time to come in. It's not like so you know to come in. It's not like you're there and you're occupying space or taking up valuable room in the parking lot.
Yeah, but some
Yes.
don't, though. I mean, I've
Right.
used it where I've.
I understand.
I know you're trying to minimize the,
I'm not trying to minimize
the
that.
traffic, but
Yeah.
it's a reality. I've been in those clinics.
Mm-hmm.
The parking lot's been packed and the waiting room's been packed.
Okay. All right. Well, in any event, we have our operations from CBS. He can answer that question. All right. Mr. Paraguay, to go back to Mr. Cornell's report.
Yes.
All right. So I think paragraph 10 was really dealing with the parking variance that we're seeking, which I think you've addressed.
Excuse me, Mr. Sachs, can you go back to the first page, number 3, about the on-site circulation? We still had some concerns about.
Sorry, Jay, yeah.
That's okay. The access, or actually the egress from the site onto Washington Road and the ability of a WB-50 to maneuver through there without encroaching onto the adjacent lanes. Is that something that you've looked at with templates and that'll work?
We have, yes. And we show the truck making the left in, circulating around, and making the left out. It's obviously the less restrictive.
So that when it does that maneuver, it's not going to go through and create a problem blocking site access? It's not going to have to cross over your ingress lane to be able to get out and make a left turn?
Oh, at the driveway?
At the driveway.
Yes, like any delivery truck, I'm certain it's going to have to cross over the ingress or egress lane. I mean, the driveway would have to be, it's 80 feet wide to avoid doing that at any location like this. But it doesn't encroach on any of the parking spaces or anything else. But yes, it would have to encroach on the inbound or outbound lane,
So
as
it's-
is typical at this type of deal.
Truck leaving may create a problem for a pedestrian or a vehicle that wants to enter the site. You may have a problem at that particular point.
While if the truck, if
As
the
the
truck
tractor
starts
trailers-
leaving before it's known, usually the truck will yield until the driveway is free and then go. But yes, if he started to make his turn, then somebody would have to wait in the turn lane or for the truck to make the move. And presumably, he's not going to start pulling out if somebody's traveling in a westbound direction, so it would only impact that center turn lane. Somebody would have to wait for the truck to pull out.
Okay.
But again, once per week, and it's...
All right, Jay, I think 10 we've covered. I think that was a traffic, that was parking.
You
Okay.
provided your information,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, I think the next traffic issue was number 17. Mr. Paraguay, if you can address that.
Oh, the site triangle, yeah. Site distance and site triangle, you're talking about two different things. The site triangle, you're looking for a 90-foot by 90-foot just area on the plan showing where there's not going to be any visible instruction.
I think there were concerns about the placement of the retaining walls that may have encroached into some of the site triangle areas, so that's why we raised that concern.
Understood, and we will, at site plan, we'll be able to address that and make sure that we grade it appropriately, so that's not an issue.
Right, I think there was another comment that
As-
had the site distance
Yes.
along Washington Road that we asked you to look at.
Yes, and as far as site distance, there's a crest in the hill to the east, so if you're pulling out of the driveway, similar to where the bar is today, looking to the left, do you have enough visibility? We've gone and field measured where you can see enough visibility. Ultimately, we're going to need to pick up more survey to design this transition, and we'll be able to actually shoot a profile line to confirm, but based on field observations, there's over 500 feet available, which is more than enough for this speed road.
All right, and I think 22 dealt with your traffic, but I think you've indicated what other volumes are at other sites, and you actually did some some traffic counts and parking counts at the Wall Township site.
If I might, I think 22 actually deals with uses that are permitted in the OS zone, what type of traffic they would generate compared to the use that you're proposing, which is not permitted.
Yeah, other uses permitted in the zone, I'll go into the traffic volume one thing, but really the nature of it. Offices and medical offices would be permitted. That isn't gonna be pass-by traffic like this is. That's gonna bring traffic from inside and outside. They may generate, just based on the size of the property, less total in and out volume, but it is gonna be more impactful in terms of how much comes in. But I think that the retail uses that are allowed, a generic retail center that could fit on this site, and there are a number of retail and service uses that are available, would generate, in those critical peak hours, a total of 38 trips less in the PM peak hour than the CVS, and 13 trips less in the Saturday. So that's a very small number. So similar magnitude of traffic. And then if you take a look at the new traffic, the non-pass-by traffic in that PM, it's a difference in 2 trips. So this generates 2 more new trips than a permitted generic retail use would generate. And I think it's also, a bank is important to look at too, and it generates similar magnitude of traffic to the CVS. Slightly less, but similar magnitude. For a 4,500 square foot bank, which is about the biggest size that you see, we could fit a giant drive-in bank on this site that, based on the traffic numbers, would generate many times more traffic than this, but I'm looking at a realistic land use that might go there. So I think bank, that shopping center, going to be similar magnitude to this. Office and medical office are going to be less, but it's going to be all new people coming in. Office building is going to have a spike in the morning and a spike out in the evening. So I think the nature of the traffic is something to consider as well.
How about tractor trailers and deliveries with the alternate uses? Are you going to have those type of movements?
You would not have any tractor trailers with a bank, I would assume. With a shopping center possibly, with a retail.
You're
type of
saying,
thing.
I don't know that a shopping center is permitted. I think that there's retail.
not necessarily
Like
shop.
small retail, nail salon.
Exactly.
Things
The
of that,
the
antique
ITE
store,
calls
things
that
of
a
that
shopping
nature.
center.
What's that?
And the ITE calls that a shopping center. There's no trip generation studies for a nail salon because they're always in a shopping center. So that's the use that I have that I can use that the ITE publishes, is shopping center. Which is typically, you use it for a generic retail. If I was, you're building a retail space with spec, that would be.
So basically, what you're saying doesn't apply. Where you're talking a shopping center, we're not talking that.
Well, I think from a practical standpoint, let me ask you this question. Is a standalone nail salon ever going to go into a site like this?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't know if I've ever seen a state.
Yeah, I don't think I have either. Or a standalone antique store or a standalone barber shop. I mean, is that something that would ever even conceivably be in a site like this?
I wouldn't think so. I would think it would.
It may not be, but that's what's required within the zone.
Well, I understand that, but obviously, we're seeking variance relief, and we obviously have to support that, which we hope to do, Mr. Chairman, and our planner will cover that. All right, let me ask you this, I think number 23. Jay, do you want us to address 23, or is that really more of a site plan issue?
I think it's more site plan related.
Okay. And 24, same thing, I think it's probably more site plan, or I know he's covered some of it, but
Right,
you
I
want him
think
to
that-
address it?
No, I think you've addressed it with the
Okay.
site distance issue.
Okay,
as well.
that's
That was
fine.
site distance.
That was a
The
site
other
distance.
comment was site triangle,
Right.
this is site distance.
Okay.
Two different things.
All right.
Same goal.
All right, Mr. Paraguay, anything else you'd like to address that you haven't covered?
No?
Okay,
I think we got it all.
all right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
I have a couple questions, Mr. Sachs.
Couple questions. That center lane for left and right turns that you're going to be adding in, what happens at the end of it by the light? Does it just terminate there, or does traffic have to move over to the right at that point? What happens at that point?
The center turn lane would terminate at wherever the last residential driveway that it could service, it would terminate at that point, which I believe is this property, but this hatching may extend farther to the east when we have.
So that doesn't continue on for people to make a left into the other development that's to the south?
No, it can't, because it shadows the left turn lane into Sayreville Boulevard, which right now is met with through traffic coming at it. It's gonna be met with the one or two cars that turn left into this last lot.
Did you do any studies on the light, how long it is, you know, it's a red light and at your peak hours where people that are backed up at that point will cut through the CVS to get into the townhome area there and not have to wait for the traffic light?
You mean somebody who doesn't want to wait to make this right turn could possibly cut through the CVS?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a little bit of a circuitous route. By the time you get to the CVS driveway, I mean, how much farther is it to wait to get here? But I can take a look at what that volume is and see what the potential would be. Yeah, making that right turn in the peak hour at most is 62 cars make the right turn from Washington on the Sayreville Boulevard, so it's a very low volume. The light is green much more of the time than it's red for the side streets, so I think the pool of potential cut-through traffic is very small. Will people do it? I mean, just like any place, it's possible, but it's sort of a circuitous route, I think.
What would you say is
to go to the light.
10 cars, 20 cars?
Figure you would have, let's assume that about 2/3 of the time is green for Washington, which I think is a good approximation. So you're talking about the potential for 20 right turns to arrive at a red, and they'd have to not arrive at the red up here, they'd have to arrive back far enough behind the CVS and be able to make that right turn. I mean, if you're one car away from the driveway, you can't cut through, you're not going anywhere until it's green. It's certainly going to clear from behind here. So the one guy who gets stuck right in the driveway, yeah, maybe, but I would say that would be few and far between.
Well, it could be too where you're coming down the road and there's no traffic in front of you, you see the light turn red, and you're right at that driveway, you turn, so I don't have to stop at all.
So another few and far between. But I think a very rare occurrence. And the only people who would be doing it, I would think, would be people who are knowledgeable and live back in this area. I mean, it's not inviting a nuisance cut through for the general public. It would be a rare occurrence for somebody who lives there.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. Getting back to the uses that are permitted in the existing zone, would it be fair to say that most of those uses don't involve tractor trailers?
I mean, I'd say that depends. There's certainly, like, I think antique stores. It's an odd conglomeration of things that are permitted there, but I mean, you could certainly have a tractor trailer delivery to any type of use.
To a nail salon or a barber shop or?
Probably not a nail salon.
Probably not, yeah, okay, all right.
And not a bank.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have
Jay's
one or two.
point about the second driveway,
I think the Downs Drive connection, is that?
or the one on Washington?
Right, was it looked at, if you did not have an access point to Downs Drive and instead had your secondary access onto Washington Road, is that something that was reviewed?
No, we didn't look at that. I don't think the county would give us the second driveway. I mean, they're making us do some pretty substantial and some expensive work to, modify this traffic signal and widen the road just to get the one driveway the way we want it. I can't imagine them giving us a second driveway. But I think what the advantage is to site circulation, emergency circulation, and anything else is the ability to use the secondary driveway to get to the traffic light to make a left onto Washington. I think that's, somebody who's uncomfortable making this left turn can go out the back and use the traffic light. I do think the majority of the traffic will come in and out of Washington. Obviously, that's where most of the traffic today is, but that secondary access point does give you that advantage.
Mr. Barry?
Greg, with the center left turn lane, do you have any concern about the potential for somebody kind of cruising up in that lane to make the left in and then running into head-on conflicts with people trying to turn into their homes?
No, and people often think that on center left turn lanes. In this case in particular, because these are primarily single-family homes and low traffic generators, I don't see that being an issue. But the reason these work is you have great visibility. So if somebody does come flying up that lane, you're not going to get into it and run into them. You're going to be able to wait until they pass before you get into the lane. You're looking head-on straight at the other traffic. So that's why these work fairly well, although they look a little uncomfortable on paper. They work.
That was required as a condition regardless of the movements on the driveway or specifically because of the left turn in from Washington?
Because of the left turn in from Washington.
Okay.
And I think you create, if you made this a left turn lane, then you do create that situation where you're gonna see people diving into the lane, and the people who wanna make the left into their homes, it's a little confusing and a worse situation. This is a safer situation, and people tend to get into that lane just before they're gonna turn, as opposed to flying down it, like you would if it was a full-width left turn lane.
And then, same thing I asked Doug about the driveway to Downs. Would it be feasible to design that in such a way as not to allow for a right turn onto Downs, if that were a consideration?
It is feasible, and we could certainly do that. The only thing, you know, a lot of the people who live back here, I'm sure a lot of those folks who are in this room, if this does happen, would probably like to be able to make the right and get back. You know, but certainly we could, it's very feasible.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? There's no other questions, Mr. Sachs, you can proceed with your next witness.
Thank you. I'm going to have our CVS representative, Mr. Skerpa? Serpy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Is it possible for you to postpone this meeting next week? It's in the public interest. You should do it. It's a public business and it should be done in public.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we have this one in the planner, and then we have the public, which that might take quite a while.
Let me ask Mr. Sachs, how long do you feel that your planner will be speaking? Give me an idea.
I would think the last two witnesses are probably going to take at least 45 minutes, so it's going to take...
45 minutes each?
No, total. So that's probably gonna
45
take-
minutes.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman,
Give me a
you want-
minute. Give me a
Yeah,
minute.
that's fine.
Let me see if I can get a consensus.
Talk to council for a second, does that make sense?
Well, we're gonna take a straw.
We're going to take a straw poll
That's fine.
first.
Okay.
The audience has heard what the gentleman said here about having to leave. What is the consensus of everyone else? Do you want to have the rest of this testimony, and then we stop this meeting, and you come back next month? Raise hands. Who would want to do it that way? It would be next month. It wouldn't be next week.
Mr. Chairman, the reason the witnesses are taking quiet.
Hold it a minute.
All right, hold on, straw poll, people in the audience, before we start talking over each other, raise a hand. You want to continue and push through this evening as the chairman initially indicated. Raise your hand if you want to keep going. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so, straw poll, you want to keep this meeting going until we're done. 2 more witnesses, approximately 45 minutes. Everybody in the public that wants to speak is going to be heard. You want to push through. I know we're putting you on the spot here, but we're all residents and hopefully friends here. Raise your hand if you want to push through. If you want to keep going, please raise your hand. Okay. We got about half the side. Now, informally, for people that want to put it off to the next meeting is a month from now. I don't know the appetite for the board to do a special meeting anytime sooner. It'll probably be about a month, 30 days. If you'd like to If you'd like the board to consider a motion to move it the rest 30 days, please raise your hand. Okay, so given that, Mr. Chairman, I didn't count them. I don't know anybody that did. It looks like it's drawn down the middle, if I'm being.
It's the other side.
More to stop?
You stop,
More
yeah.
to stop?
Yeah, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I would,
I just want the public to know this also. We have said 45 minutes. Mr. Sachs has said 45 minutes for his people. But that doesn't include the questions that this board is going to ask.
exactly.
So it could be much longer than that. If you want, if I have a consensus here that wants to stop, I will try and get a special meeting, but that special meeting would have to be a cooperation between the applicant and the board in order to have that special meeting, and it would be your obligation and responsibility that if you want to be here, to come here on that date.
Mr. Chairman, is the next meeting August 28th?
That's our next scheduled meeting,
Right, unless you consider a special meeting.
correct?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the public will have sat here for 3.5 hours by 11 o'clock. And then they want to speak. They're concerned residents, they live in that area. That's not really fair to the public, to put them on at 11, 12, or 12 o'clock. That really isn't fair to the public. And these residents who, as he said, many of these people work in New York. They got to be on a 6:30 train tomorrow morning. I'm retired. I could stay here. But that's really not fair to the general public.
Mr. Chairman, let me comment. I understand the concerns of the members of the public. I understand Mr. Olszewski's concerns. If the board is inclined to carry this to another, to continue this meeting, we don't have any objection to that. We just have 2 other witnesses, but we can bring them back. I'd certainly like to see if we can get a special meeting, but if not, then, the August 28th, we'll have to work.
All right, supposedly we do it this way. We'll listen to the CVS representative.
That's fine.
He'll tell us his operation on the store, and then we're going to stop for tonight. So it's probably going to be another 15, 20 minutes, and we're going to schedule the next meeting, unless you're advised otherwise, for August the 28th at 7:30. Yes?
The next meeting, will the CVS representative do a synopsis of what was discussed during this meeting? Or are we going to continue with their last representative and witness, and then we're going to jump right into the public?
Depending on whether or not the CVS representative is completely done with his testimony. If it's all done with his testimony tonight, then he won't testify next time. If he's not completely done or our questions aren't completed, then he'll come back for the 28th.
Yeah, I propose that we stop a hard stop here and let the 2 other testimonies take place in the second meeting that's going to happen. Yeah. We're going to come in and it's going to be a month later. Nobody's going to know all the details, fresh in their mind. There's going to be one other testimony.
So no, what you're asking is that we stop the proceedings right now, tonight, call it a night, and have it on the 28th. Mr. Sachs, are you available with, what's your?
Mr. Chairman, I'm available, my planner's available, you're available? That's fine. I'm not going to dictate how the board operates, Mr. Chairman, so if you want to stop it now, that's fine.
What's the board's pleasure on this?
well, we can discuss it.
No, I'll just do it, but I want to pull from.
And I agree, and I agree with that the CVS person, putting those 2 together.
We'll bring everybody back. We'll bring everybody back, that's fine.
Okay, we are going to end this meeting now, and I'm putting everyone on notice here that the next meeting will be the 28th of August, and we will continue with the 2 witnesses from the applicant and we'll proceed from there. You're not going to get any further notice on anything, so it's your obligation and responsibility to make sure that you're here for that particular night, okay? Well, the statistics on it, getting a special meeting together is a little more involved. It's a situation of having to post in the newspapers and giving notices out. It's easier because we already have the mechanics in place to do it for the 28th of August. So it's the 28th of August at 7:30, and we'll continue this application. Okay? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much.
Let's see what we could do. I don't want to do it, but we have the choice.
Ron, are we approving the minutes from last month? Okay. Yeah.
You're okay with that?
Yes. I have no place to put it. Okay.
You handled the meeting very well.
This is the traffic generator.
I like your socks. I'm glad I don't have to testify now. I'm tired. You know, I don't blame you. I'm glad you didn't have to listen to me either. It's late.
I thought I was gonna be here till 1 in the morning.
Me too, and I don't know about you. I don't remember maybe like go that late anymore. Make sure you're like swipe down. Crazy. All right, see you soon. Good night.
Okay, I want to continue the meeting that we have here. As everyone had the opportunity to read over last month's minutes,
Yes.
what's your pleasure with the minutes from last month's meeting?
Make a motion to approve?
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of last meeting. Minutes are accepted. I want to bring up has everyone had the opportunity to look over the Cedarville Zoning Board of Adjustment Annual Meeting of 2018? This was in our packet from Mr. Barry. That particular report, I want to hold over for comments till next meeting, and we can discuss that further. Of course, that might be held over until September's meeting if we're going to have a situation at next meeting. So just keep that in mind, that report, that annual report from 2018. We do have a correction that we have to make, but we'll make it at our next regular meeting in August if possible.
Ron, if I may, I spoke with Carl about that correction, and I'll reissue the report in advance of the next meeting, so that
Okay.
we all have a clean copy with an up-to-date date
O-
on it.
Okay, Mr. Barry will there is a correction that we do have to make on that annual report before we send it to the mayor and council. So he'll make that report and send it all out to everyone in an email before next meeting so you can look it over. Is there anything else that the board wants to discuss before we adjourn? If not, I make a motion to adjourn. Meeting's adjourned.
That was the impact.
I'm gonna call Carl tomorrow and tell him we don't want him anymore. We got Hey, listen, guys, make sure we're all here for next meeting, because, we're in the middle of everything.
As long as you get 7.
Yeah, Jay, have a good trip.
They're very willing. They're gonna make their changes afterwards. They're too, or they didn't like our questions. The direction we were heading. They were very, very easy to say, let's postpone it now. They got it. And Jason Kaplan was having a stroke.